he's just gradually expanded his empire. And he's not the only billionaire to do that, but he does it the most loudly and egregiously, right? I mean, Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post. Bernard Arnault in France, who's head of the Louis Vuitton fashion empire, has bought media in France as well. So they all kind of do it, but Musk is definitely the most offensive and the least competent, I think, as well. And now what you have is he's doing the same thing in the federal government. He's saying, I can cut costs like I thought I could at X, even though it now crashes. And he's saying that, get rid of all these regulations and stuff and everything will be fine. Now, I don't doubt that it will make him money, but it's just gross incompetence. I mean, we shouldn't fool ourselves into thinking that he's some kind of genius with like a grand plan. I don't think he is. I think he's like an opportunistic, egotistical money grabber who has had a few lucky breaks, including government subsidies, and now finds himself at the forefront, at the head of the government, able seemingly to act with impunity.
Yeah, I think, Tesla goes bankrupt without the intervention of the Obama government, right?
Yes.
So
I know. I've never been so against renewable energy because they had that renewable energy subsidy.
Yeah.
If I could go back and stop Obama.
It's crazy, isn't it? His political journey, we're kind of getting off topic here, but I'll talk about it anyway. From Obama era liberal, vocal on climate change, certainly soft on LGBT issues, to where he is now, where he's like praising the far right in Germany and throwing Nazi salutes from behind a presidential pulpit in America. And so how does one lead to the other? Do you know what I mean? Like, is it just political opportunism? And in the same way, we've mentioned the subsidies, but SpaceX has a lot of government contracts.
Yes.
Tesla is also involved in tendering for them.
And since January as well, I think SpaceX has been awarded more, right, while they've been cutting the other government funding.
Exactly. So is it naked self-interest? Do you think he's sincere in adopting these politics? Does he do it because it's expedient and it powers him in close to Trump? Like, what's your read?
My read is kind of rather banal, actually. I think he's just having a midlife crisis. And I honestly, I'd love to give you a really deep economic answer, but the problem is, and I think this is relevant to the book, right? Because one of the chapters is about billionaires. And one of the problems is that, even if maybe you could say in some cases incomes go up, in certain periods for certain people, that's true. That's true of the economy. It does grow over time on average, right? So in some ways we have gotten richer. I will acknowledge that. But you have these people at the top of the economy where what happens, they have so much power and control and influence. What happens to them matters to us. And I do think what happened to Elon Musk, to be honest with you, his trans daughter disowned him because he wouldn't accept her identity, which is obviously bad parenting. He then started to seemingly go through a midlife crisis, got a bit high on his own supply, took over Twitter, but people forget he didn't want to. He made a bid on a whim with a silly tweet that was something like, it was like he bid, what did he bid? Like 44.20 for the, because that's the weed number and he's really funny. You're 50 years old, man. You're 50 years old.
But you're right.
And then he tried to back out, right, in the Delaware court, and then they made him, right. And so I don't think there's a grand master plan. I think he's a really horrible person and a moron who finds himself in this position, and that's the truth.
It's crazy, and I think you're right to talk about the fact that his daughter's transition and that radicalizing him. Like, also, he's on Ket. Do you know? You said high on his own supply, and it's he's actually high on ketamine.
No, he's actually high.
and he barely sleeps. And you're sort of, the thing that amazes me is how all of these things you look at and you go, Christ, how do you function? How are you high functioning? Because you are the richest man in the world. Because you are in these positions of tangible power and responsibility. Even more so now you're involved with the Trump administration. What I'm seeing and how dysfunctional it appears to be surely cannot be reflective of how he conducts himself privately, because how on earth would he get to the position he's in is like the way the suspicion I have about my own logic.
I mean, so to extend as much charity as possible to him, I think he's probably the type of guy who's pretty good at maths at school, right? He's probably got that kind of smarts in there somewhere. I mean, it might have been destroyed by the ketamine, but I think he's got that in the locker. I think he does work quite a lot.
Yeah.
I think he works quite long hours. I think that's pretty well established. And I do think he's extremely good at raising capital. There's no way. He's really good at wooing investors. And I think what he's kind of done is he's kind of wooed the whole world in a way, right? I mean, lots of people hate him, but lots of people love him. And he's kind of done that. And he's built up this whole kind of, bullshit factor around himself where he's worth much more than he should be based on, if you look at like Tesla sales or what SpaceX have achieved, it's something, but it's not, he's got almost $500 billion in wealth. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so I think
price to earnings ratios are like so out of kilter.
Completely. Yeah. And yeah, everyone knows that who's like in the market, but he just manages to ride his own bubble. I mean, people talk about what's the next bubble. I think it's just the Musk bubble.
Yeah.
I think it's simply him, right? And if he manages to take control of the government to the extent that he wants, then maybe it will never burst, sadly, or not burst for a very long time.
One of the... So I'll backtrack slightly before I talk about inequality in the housing crisis. I don't think you could pursue the same sort of aggressive cuts program to the UK bureaucracy, government, call it whatever you want, depending on your political persuasion, because we are in a post-austerity moment. And so when the plan that's being reported in the media at the moment, that Keir Starmer is suggesting that some government departments might have to cut by as much as 11.5% from their budgets in order to fund this increase in defence spending. And you go, how on earth is that feasible? How on earth will that can it happen? Will it happen? Should it happen? I guess I would invite your criticisms, your remarks about whether or not that's the correct course of action. That's even possible.
I think, we talked about being detached. I think to come into a department, it's very management consultant, isn't it? To come into a department,
cut costs, increase profits.
Yeah, exactly. And, the only way you're going to do that, it's possible. Of course, it's possible because you can always just, fire people or close down departments. But you're going to find a major impact on the services that have been provided. And, Cambridge University released a report a couple of years ago about public service decline in the UK, and it's declining across the board. It's really unequal. It's really patchy already. And local services, I think, are the ones that have suffered the most under austerity. But we've had the doctors and nurses strike. We've had the teacher strikes, right? Teachers being underpaid and overworked. Teachers sort of... bringing food to school to feed the children. I had a friend who worked for, Teach First, the graduate scheme, and she said they were all taken aside before they started their training, before they started their school, and told that they're not allowed to take the children home with them because, and I don't mean that in that way. I mean it in a you're like, Jesus Christ, man, someone needs to take care of you. It's gut wrenching, right? And so we're at that stage with public services. So what do you want to do next? Right? What do you want to do next? Do you want to make it even? Do you want to close schools and some kids just don't go to school? Then close hospitals and some areas don't have hospitals? Because I think that's next. That has to be next. There's no other way of doing it. And 10 years ago, I would have been a sort of standard lefty and said, okay, just cut defense spending. But now I'm not even sure about that with Ukraine and Russia and everything. To be honest, I'm not sure about that either. So there are. Surely, we've all dealt with the government, right? There are areas for efficiencies, but I think you're talking about things like whether filling in a form is easier. You're talking about maybe getting rid of one or two fluffy positions, right? You can't just swoop in and be I act like you're the first person to think of making the government more efficient. Loads of people have thought of that. And they're not going to do it.